Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg says he would not have pressured former Senator Al Franken to resign, even though some of his 2020 rivals did. The former Minnesota lawmaker was accused of sexual harassment in 2017, including forcible kissing and groping. He ultimately stepped down later that year under pressure from fellow Democratic lawmakers. Buttigieg addressed this during a town hall last night.
I think it was his decision to make, but I think the way that we basically held him to a higher standard than the GOP does their people has been used against us.
Do you think he should have been pushed to leave?
Again, it was his decision. I think that.
But I'm not asking about his decision. Should the other members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate, starting at the top, Chuck Schumer down, and the other people that pushed him to get out, they put a lot of pressure on him to leave. Were they right or wrong?
Well, I think it's not a bad thing that we hold ourselves to a higher standard.
But were they right to do that, to push him out of the Senate? Because they did.
I would not have applied that pressure at that time before we knew more.
For more on this, we're joined by Washington Post national political reporter Matt Viser. Welcome, Matt. Great to have you with us. That could have been seen as a swipe at Buttigieg's opponent, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. But we should note that both Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris also pushed for Franken's resignation. How are these candidates responding?
Yeah, I mean, Gillibrand is pushing back rather aggressively against Buttigieg's comments. Of course, she was the first senator to publicly call on Franken to step aside. And she's pointed out that this was the 8th instance of sexual allegations against Senator Franken. And as you point out, most of at least 2, and actually most of the senators who are running for president did the same. Cory Booker as well. Other senators did come around. Bernie Sanders that afternoon called on Al Franken to resign. So this was a moment that most of the Democratic senators signed on to, Gillibrand being the first, and has taken the most heat of anybody for that call.
Yeah, indeed. Now, so, Matt, in addition to this, Buttigieg was also asked why female voters should pick him over female candidates. And in turn, he talked about his experience as a mayor and in the military. But how likely is that message to resonate with women?
I mean, he has a challenge in that respect, and in some ways with black voters as well. He's also sort of openly discussed his challenge with that constituency, black voters and women both being driving forces in this primary, and he's up against a field of very strong female candidates. So I think it's a challenge for his campaign, and polling has shown that. And I think he's recognizing that and trying to do things. It'll be sort of a test on whether these comments prove to be a hindrance to that effort on his part.
And another notable moment, Matt, from last night's town hall was when Buttigieg said that if he were serving in Congress, he would vote to impeach President Trump. But does he have any argument that would convince the likes of Speaker Nancy Pelosi on this topic?
Probably not. I mean, Nancy Pelosi has her own considerations among her Democratic caucus, and it's interesting to note as the presidential candidates kind of get out in front of her on this. They are largely on board with moving toward impeachment proceedings. Almost all of the candidates. Joe Biden being a little bit of an exception, where he has been more in the Nancy Pelosi vein of wanting to wait there. So, I mean, I think it's a position that puts Buttigieg in line with his other presidential candidates, but out of step with his party leadership.
And speaking of the former vice president, Joe Biden rolled out his climate plan today while in New Hampshire. The $5 trillion proposal embraces the Green New Deal while setting a longer timeline of achieving net zero emissions and a 100% clean energy economy. So, Matt, do you think that this plan will help silence some of the criticism he's been getting from far left voters?
Perhaps some, but not a huge amount, because I think there's still some criticism coming from some environmental groups over the plan, that it's not going far enough on certain areas. So I think he's going to face some continued challenges on this. And of course, some of them are claiming credit that he moved to announce the plan, earlier than maybe expected. But I think there are some areas where the plan doesn't go far enough in the eyes of many in the Democratic primary.
Now, Matt, it's sort of interesting because while explaining his climate proposal to voters in New Hampshire there, the former VP paused his speech to give a member in the audience sitting on the floor a seat cushion. Let's take a look at that moment.
For you. We have a little secret going here. I want the press to know she pulled me close. I just want you to know, okay? All right? And I was delighted.
So what's the consensus on how he's sort of handling his creepy Joe persona that he gets accused of sometimes in his public relations with women there? Is his campaign concerned at all about his tendency to sort of joke about it and make light of it, in face of the allegation, in light of the allegations he's faced?
It has become a sort of laugh line for him, which has the potential to backfire. He's done this a couple of times, including right after he said that he'd heard the messages from women who said that he made them feel uncomfortable and that he was taking it to heart and would change his behavior. The next day, he was on stage here in Washington and kind of made it a joke at that time as well. So he certainly hasn't changed much of his behavior on the campaign trail. He's still quite affectionate with people, although usually those voters are the ones initiating the exchanges with him. But I think it is going to be a continued thing that he will face, and potentially in a prominent moment. So far, they've been sort of these small moments during campaign events where he sort of brushed them aside.
Right, and it's hard to see him being able to, as you pointed out, when someone in the audience or one of the voters initiates it. It's hard to see him, reacting in a negative way. He's so used to just taking it in, So it'll be interesting to see if he can put the brakes on that. Now, he speaks again tonight in New Hampshire. Bernie Sanders largely defeated Hillary Clinton there in the 2016 Democratic primary. And progressive Senator Elizabeth Warren is also hoping to win that state's primary. Explain to us just how essential this state is for these three frontrunners.
It's very important in that it'll probably winnow the field. I don't think that it will be decisive by any stretch given the field so large. But for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in particular, it's an important state. They both represent states that adjoin New Hampshire, and it's been sort of a key part for both of their candidacies in terms of trying to figure out, at least given the current construct of the field, who will face Joe Biden. He's been the front runner. He's atop all the polls, and who will be the alternative to him in this contest is still very much up in the air. New Hampshire could play a role in sort of winnowing that field quite a bit.
All right, Matt Viser, we thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.